Okay, and as soon as this shows that we're live, I'm going to go ahead and, yeah, it's showing we're now streaming live. Go ahead and we're going to play our. Okay, share computer sound. Okay, everybody, here we go. And Happy New Year, everybody. I'm Steve Sande. I'm here with Marty Edwards, and you're watching AWT TV, the official podcast TV show of Apple World today. And so did you do anything exciting for New Year's Eve?
Yes, I went to bed 2 hours before it came in, told my wife, wake me up. And so, sort of just had some long days here lately. It's wiped out. And I don't know, when you get to the point of life that you want to sleep in the new year, you know, you've crossed the point. But we did see it and said Happy New Year, and I went back to sleep.
Yeah, it was funny with us. We were, we thought about watching a movie, because traditionally we've watched, 1, 2, or 3 movies. Sometimes we'll watch if there's a movie trilogy or something, we'll watch that. And this year we were just looking at everything going, nope, don't feel like watching that. Don't want to watch that. Don't want to watch that. So we ended up, watching hours of reruns. And then we noticed that the Sci-Fi Channel, which did its usual thing on New Year's Eve, and actually yesterday, New Year's Day as well, but they were showing Twilight Zone reruns. So we got hooked on those. Got to midnight and said, okay, Happy New Year, let's go to sleep.
Yeah, I know what you mean there. So no, I didn't do really anything special at all. Just did actually see it in for a few minutes, and that's about it. Pretty uneventful here.
Yeah.
Except last night was sort of eventful. It's our first sub-zero temperature in 3 years.
No kidding?
Yeah, we dropped below zero last night.
Yeah,
Fahrenheit, of course, and so it was quite chilly. But
I don't know if we've gotten below zero so far this year, which is really odd because usually by this point we'll have a couple of days when it's like -5 or -14 or whatever. But what I'm expecting, starting, I think Friday or Thursday, we have the National Western Stock Show is in town. In fact, we're going to a function tomorrow night. They always have a art show, what they call the red carpet event, the night before the general stock show starts in rodeo. So we're going to that tomorrow night. It's not supposed to snow. And the funny thing is, you look at the forecast for next week and a half, and they're saying, it's going to be kind of warm during the day, get down into the 20s at night. But we always, people in Denver talk about stock show weather. And usually what that means is you get these nasty snowstorms and sub-zero temperatures, and it's just miserable. But the Cowboys are out there anyway.
Well, sub-zero is a little unusual for us. Even now our average high should be, I think, 45 or so. So I think yesterday our high was only 19. So really had an Arctic blast here, but it's by Sunday, I think they're calling for a mid-40s. So back to normal.
Wow. Yeah, I'm just waiting until I think it's Saturday. We're supposed to get in like 60 or 61, and that'll seem hot. Mm-hmm. Well, we're actually, it's hard to believe we're in 2018.
We are.
Apple, pretty much did everything they were supposed to do in 2017, with one exception, of course, being the HomePod. But I thought, maybe we talk about some of the things we kind of like to see in 2018,
Yeah.
and just kind of let our imaginations wander where they may. So I'm going to let you start because you always have some good ideas.
Well, I don't know. Of course, last time we came together, we talked about what we'd done the past year. So talk about what we plan on doing this year and what we think Apple will do. Well, I think it's a given. There'll be a new iPhone this year, probably September. There'll be probably an event. Obviously, iOS 12 will come out. Those are given, so I shouldn't even really mention those. I do think, even though 2018 was not mentioned, I think the Mac Pro will come out. That's what I'm hoping for most, because
Yeah.
I do plan on making that a purchase. I did pass on the iMac Pro, and after seeing a lot of the teardowns and reviews, I'm glad I did, because it, a lot are saying they feel like it overheats a little bit. The fans don't throttle up the way that they should. They feel, they keep them too quiet. I don't mind a big roaring computer, because I want to push it. But I guess that's what I'm hoping for Apple this year. Mainly they come on out with the Mac Pro. And I would like to see, this is not something you'd ever find on a shelf, but maybe more attention to a little bit of, so to say, detail in iOS and macOS as well. Maybe a little less buggy, and really lock it down where it's absolutely rock solid.
Yeah.
It seems like I've found a few little bugs lately and maybe not running quite as smooth. Even this past Sunday, I was trying to use my wife's phone because I was broadcasting live to YouTube on my phone, and I was using hers to do a Facebook live audio only broadcast. And during that, her phone rebooted twice, so I couldn't even do it. So just a flat out reboot. Apple logo came up.
That's weird.
Yeah, and I wasn't touching it. It was laying on a podium, just Apple logo suddenly.
Wow.
So it must have been in that app. So I'm hoping Apple will really short up. I know this is a theme, and our listeners are going to roll their eyes whenever I mention it again, but I feel like Apple, I guess, want them to streamline what they're doing.
Yeah.
Instead of getting into so many side businesses. And of course, even on Apple World Today, we reported they're looking to maybe even buy Netflix.
Yeah. Which I thought that was interesting. They're saying like a 40% chance, that it could go through. That would be, for a company that wants to get out there and do a big, push into content, that would be a perfect purchase there. But remains to be seen, of course, if it actually happens. But they certainly have the cash to do it, and I think they've got the will to do it too. So
I'm going to go out on a limb with one thing that I wish Apple would do this year. I think it's coming, but it probably won't be this year. I would love to see them develop, and this will be the last thing I mention, I'll turn it to you, micro LED displays for the phones. That's one thing. That. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen, but I've actually seen some video. It only bothers about 10% of the people, but the LEDs have a refresh rate that a lot of people are sensitive to and gives them headaches. I don't know if I'm one or not because I don't have an OLED screen.
I do, and it doesn't give me headaches.
A lot of people, I had to sometimes direct you to, a lot of people, it's a phase modulation that they use to refresh, and a lot of people are really sensitive to that, whereas LCD doesn't have that. But I think I had one OLED in the past. I don't recall it bothered me. But I'm looking for micro LEDs, so I'll leave it at those couple of wish list. Just really locked down, super solid. And I mentioned it every broadcast, it seems like last year. I want active icons. I want the weather to show the weather. I'd love for the calendar to maybe just a little scroll of what's coming up next. The phones have the power, just to do that. So anyway, what are you looking for?
Wow, that's a good question. One thing I think, I'd really like to see this year, and I honestly don't know if we're going to see it, because I think Apple is more looking at probably maintaining the size of the Mac line. In other words, not adding new Macs, but kind of streamlining it a little bit more. But I'd love to see them do something with the Mac Mini finally. It has really been way too long. And that's such a cool little machine. You know, you could make it even smaller. You know, I still think if they got out there and came up with something, well, hello, Mary. One of our cats is talking here. But I thought if they could come up with something that would be the size of the existing Apple TV, solid state drive, maybe a couple of USB 3, Thunderbolt 3 ports on it, or USB-C Thunderbolt 3 ports on it. Just make it tiny, and then make it maybe not the most powerful Mac out there, but if you could make it the cheapest possible Mac, and kind of maybe push it out there for less than $200, which would be a really inexpensive Mac, I think you'd have a lot of people who'd say, I'm going to buy one of those instead of playing around with this idea that I had to do something with a Raspberry Pi,
right,
or something like that. In the Windows world, of course, they've got the whatever they call them, micro PCs, the little box-sized ones that are just tiny like that. They're not super powerful, but people use them for things like Plex servers. It makes so much sense for them to do something like that. Make it kind of more of a hobbyist Mac, since the rest of them you can't really do anything to. Make it so, just make it easy for people to play with it.
Yeah. That's a good idea, and I certainly would be interested in that. Of course, I'm using a Mac Mini, but I like having dedicated machines for like a server for doing something. That'd make a perfect server just to be a mail or web server run. A lot of people don't realize, maybe even some of our viewers don't, you can buy a server version of macOS for $20.
Yeah, $20. Yeah, and I wrote in fact, if anybody wants to go out and learn, I'm trying to remember how many lessons I had, but about 7 different lessons in setting up Mac OS server on a Mac Mini. But if anybody's interested, the series is out on the OWC blog site, which is blog.macsales.com, and just do a search for server, and you'll probably find the series. But it's surprisingly easy to set up. It runs as an application on any Mac. And the hardest part, and this has always been that way for any server software that you're looking at, but the hardest part is actually going through and doing the configuration for like domain name service, directories, different things like that. Once you've got that set up, it's amazing how easy it works with both other Macs, for doing file sharing or group backups to one device, and with iOS too. So very cool. Setting up your own mail server is pretty amazing. Setting up your own web server, like I said, they even have a wiki server built in there. So a lot you can do with it. A tremendous amount.
Yeah, that is for $20. You was talking about that really, and this is sort of expanding upon yours, but Samsung has something called the DeX, DEX, and they say for the next Galaxy phone, I was just reading today, basically you come in, lay your phone down, your phone becomes your computer. You have a monitor, keyboard and mouse, and they say the next is probably even going to be wireless to it, the video and everything. I'd love to see Apple get into something like that where you could have a monitor, keyboard, and mouse, lay your phone down, and it basically becomes an iOS computer, a vertical one. And
well, I was going to say one thing that could really help make that happen too. I don't know if you've seen some of the rumors about possible 6.8-inch iPhone, with the OLED display, something like a supersized iPhone 10, if you will. If I kind of brought it up on the podcast today. I said if that comes out, why would anybody need a Mac Mini? You could actually have this, an iPad Mini. You could actually have this, supersized device. If they just took the cellular capability out of it, it could be essentially an iPad. Good grief, what do they call it? Excuse me, iPhone, or no, the iPod, excuse me. But it could be one of the, iPod models like we see right now, that kind of look like an iPhone without having the cellular built in there. I'm babbling tonight, but it's been a long day. I got up at 4 o'clock this morning.
Well, that's odd because I think I basically woke up at 4:10 and that was it for the day. So if we both fall asleep during our broadcast,
well, hopefully the viewers aren't going to do that.
Yeah, we're both just nodding over here, So, I think we got some good ideas for Apple for the year. They just need to sort of tune in and do them. But
yeah, I think that idea of the 6.8 inch, whatever you want to call it, iPhone 11, whatever it happens to be. I love that idea. It would be about the size of the iPhone 6, 7, and 6S Plus right now, and 8 Plus, but it would have that edge-to-edge screen, so of course, be much larger.
Right.
And that really would make an iPad mini kind of obsolete.
Well, it really will. I think it's at the end of its life as far as any refreshes, I don't think that's going to happen. So that's some things we would like for Apple to do. What do you think they will do this year? I mean, we've touched on it. New iPhone, obviously, in September. iOS will be revealed in June if they hold to. Think there'll be an iPad refresh or anything?
I don't know, because you take a look at the iPad Pro line is actually pretty up to date. 10.5 inch came out this year, or last year, 2017. Maybe the 12.9 could be updated. I would think that they'll probably look at updating the iPad pen or pencil, or the Apple Pencil. Just because they can probably add some additional features to it, jack the price up and sell a bunch of them. I think just about everything that we see is probably going to start coming with wireless charging. We already see that with the iPhones. These guys are supposed to get it here soon. And it'd be very cool if you could extend that to the Mac, just be able to lay your Mac, your iPhone, your watch onto a pad, and boom, they're all charged up.
Yeah, that's probably going to be it pretty much across the board, wireless charging. I had read somewhere, and I don't recall where, one of the sites I checked, there probably may be a refresh of the Apple Watch in a round format. I saw that somewhere.
Speaking of, this is totally off the subject, but I was going to bring something up. One of my pieces on the Apple World Today news update today was about, of course, Wall Street analysts. Some of them are saying, oh my God, we think, Apple's only going to have produced and sold about 30 million iPhones in the first quarter ending December 31st. And my God, that's a horrible thing. Well, if the cruise that I was just on is any indication, I think they probably sold closer to what Apple thought it was going to sell, which is like 50 million. And the reason I say that is I couldn't believe how many iPhone 10s I saw. They were absolutely everywhere. I mean, everywhere I looked, you can see that distinctive notch up at the top of the screen. And I went, iPhone 10, iPhone 10. I saw one entire family. We were sitting at a steak restaurant on the ship that we were on, and they were seated at the next table. And I got to say, these people probably have a lot more money than sense, or they're in deep debt, one of the two. But literally, I think they had 4 kids, the 2 adults, and then their friends. Everybody at the table, probably 9 people, each one of them had an iPhone 10. And I mean, I like I said, I think I saw more iPhone 10s than I did regular iPhones on this trip. It was crazy.
That is interesting. Oddly enough, of course, I do live in the country, don't get out a whole lot either. So far out in the wild of seeing people, I've seen none. Not my
Whoa.
first one. Yeah, none. I wanted to actually see it in person, so I had to go to a store and just look at it on display because I had never seen even one person carrying, and I still haven't to this day. I think people
Hmm.
probably around here might be a little bit more conservative in their purchases, and if it works, they hang on to it. A lot of people
Yeah.
do. They're not hobbyists; they just want things to work. Of course, I didn't upgrade this round either. But people will keep their phones. Let's just, in a pretend in a world, if I could get a new battery for $30, I might keep it going, you know.
I think
And
Barb's
so
going to take advantage of that, by the way, because she's got an iPhone 6S, and she's kind of been complaining that even before word came out that about the slowdown, uh, she was kind of complaining. It seems a little slow, seems a little doggy. Was having problems charging. It seems like it doesn't keep a charge very long. So I think she's going to try taking advantage of that $29 upgrade. That's a heck of a deal.
well, if anyone hasn't heard, you don't even have to have the diagnostics run now. Any iPhone 6 or later, you can get your battery replaced for $30. So that's really a pretty good deal. You basically get a new phone.
I really hope that they keep that in perpetuity.
Yeah, I
Don't.
do too.
Yeah, I mean that would be great because I think a
Uh,
lot more people would be willing. Well, wait a second, that will destroy Apple if we make it so that
yeah.
you can bring back the power of your machine simply by spending $30.
Yeah, I might, take advantage of it sometime. I tell you, even if I decide to upgrade this fall, I mean, I don't think I've ever kept a phone any more than 2 years. I only did that once. But it would be to my advantage to go to an Apple store, get the replacement, and then a good selling point would be look at their diagnostics hardware. I just replaced this battery. You're getting a new phone.
Yeah,
And you could really recoup your $30 that way. And
very, very
so
quickly.
of course, Apple is doing that, and they're going to the next version of iOS 11. I don't know if it'll be the next one, but they're going to have the software where we can tell the health of the battery,
Yeah,
and so that'll
I
be
tell
good.
you, that's something that honestly has been needed since day one.
I
Being able
agree.
to
Yeah.
say how many charge cycles have I gone through? Is it not reaching 100%? Does it seem to be dropping faster than it did before? I don't know if that's exactly what they'll be looking at in terms of the diagnostic software, but that would be awesome to be able to have that knowledge, and you could really tell, oh, maybe really do have a problem
All
here.
right.
Maybe it's just not the 58 apps that I've got running at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, mine's running great. There are a few anomalies. I think iOS does have a few little bugs. Any software is going to be buggy, as being an engineer. It's not going to be perfect
Yeah.
software. I guess about the only perfect software I remember how you'd first do in your very first coding, print hello, go to line one. you
Yeah.
know, that
Hello, hello,
might
hello,
be
hello.
bug free, but other than that, when I was first learning to program, I think it was in basic, most likely. I wrote a little app that would just add up numbers, just print them one, two, three, and I'd leave it running all night, see how far it would get and stuff like that. It'd still be
Yeah.
running. So it was sort
Yeah,
of,
and you felt great. You got there the next morning and you're up into the 100,000
yeah, I
numbers
know
or
it,
something like that.
and it's still running just fine. So it's only 86,400 seconds in a day. So you,
Oh man. I
uh,
was just going to throw this out because we've talked about programming in BASIC before, and there's actually a BASIC system that you can buy for iOS, um, and I'm trying to think of the name of it right now. Tech Basic is the name of it, and it's funny because sometimes you run into these kind of collisions, where you have or had a similar interest to another person at about the same time and all the rest of that stuff. And when I was writing for TUA, I found out about, this Tech Basic, got some information about it, asked if I could get a promo copy of it to write a review. And it's actually quite powerful. I mean, you can make pretty nice iOS applications, with the buttons and sliders and all the, the normal things that you would see out there. And so I got to talking to this guy, and I wish I could remember his name right now, but he's, the guy who started that company. He wrote Tech Basic, really because he wanted to see if he could do it. And but we got to talking, and it turns out back, in years and years and years ago, both of us were probably had seen each other at rocket contests in the Colorado, New Mexico area. So it was just totally bizarre reading about that. He's still flying rockets that are now a lot more high powered than they were back when we were kids. But, he talked about doing data acquisition using an iPhone and Tech Basic and some other little parts that you could buy as well. So very, very cool. So Tech Basic, there's something to talk about and go out and look for.
Oh, that is interesting. You don't even think about anything being done with BASIC anymore. This isn't BASIC, but of course, an early language obviously was Pascal. And I'm sure you've seen pending Apple's approval and review, they're going to release a source code for the Apple Lisa this year.
Yeah. Isn't that cool? I mean, I really do find that to be absolutely fascinating, because it's just something different that you don't expect to see here, is software that, let's see, 1983, 35 years old. So I just wonder if somebody will manage to port it to something like a PC. You'll have the fastest Lisa in existence.
Yeah, and consider how much faster your iPhone is than that Lisa was.
Yeah. Yeah, anyway, here we are. The guy's name is Mike Waterfield, and the name of the company is ByteWorks, and the application Tech Basic is $14.99, runs on iPhone and iPad, and it is pretty interesting. They talk about these TI sensor tags that you can pick up, and you can attach to them over Bluetooth, and you can write programs that'll actually display data coming in from the sensors. They talk about Bluetooth key fobs and things like that. You can make write your own 3D graphing unit there. And then he's got this one app that's the rocket flight analysis, which is really pretty cool. But you go to the App Store and just look for, like I said, Tech Basic, TECHBASIC. You'll find it and you'll probably be amazed. It's very cool. So, enough about that.
Well, thinking about the things that might come out this year, we hope. I'm going to bring up the Mac Pro again. I guess, do you think it'll be out this year?
I think they almost have to. Of course, they came out with the iMac Pro, and that's going to make some people happy. And what I mean by that is you may have some designers or people who do video editing who just say, hey, it's got the power. I don't care if it's expandable or not. I'm going to buy, the $13,000 version with whatever, 18 cores and, tons of RAM and, as much SSD as I can. And that's going to be fine for me. On the other hand, you do have the people for whom having a box that you can add cards to, that you can stuff as much RAM in there as you want to, maybe have a upgradable CPU, they're going to wait for that. And I think Apple has waited a bit too long if they go into 2019. So I really hope they do deliver it this year.
I'm almost thinking it'll be maybe a summertime. Could be at WWDC. Of course, that's a software event, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it at summertime. And I agree. And we've mentioned before, I do like the machines I can upgrade and tinker, even if I don't, because I like that form factor. I want to be able to add another memory stick or SSD or whatever I want to be able to do. I feel it'd be fairly basic, loaded with IO ports. And what form factor? I don't know. There's only so much you can do. I don't think it's going to be a cylinder. I don't think, I don't think it's going to be the cheese grater. I think it'll be somewhere in between. I think it'll be a nice, tower type, but very maybe symmetrical the way, we expect Apple to be or something.
You know what I'm going for?
What's that?
I'm going to go way out on a limb since Apple loves wireless things. I'm going to have a totally wireless Mac Pro, and it's in a sphere that floats above a magnetic base, and it just floats up there. Of course, you can't plug anything into it, but
yeah. Well, it would look good. Sometimes, and I do feel a little bit that Apple is. I tend to be function over form. I want it to function. It doesn't really matter how it looks to me. I just want it to perform. But I think Apple does tend to be form over function. Speaking of, did you see that the chairs in the new Apple campus that they situated them with, $1,200 a piece?
Yeah.
Basic chairs you sit in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the thing I just had to chuckle about was that they basically had them designed, by scratch, similar to the old Herman Miller Arion chair, which, as people bring up, it's kind of like the chair for the 1980s when the first personal computers came out. People were starting to spend a lot of time sitting in front of a computer. So they came out with that wonderful adjustable chair. And this, it sounds like they pretty much just, threw the, ideas out and said, let's make just a really, really comfortable ergonomic chair that people are going to be able to sit in. And it looks like they've done it.
Yeah, well, it looks like a chair. Of course, we won't know yet. I think Apple's done a lot of design like that. This is probably a little bit of rumor, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's not true, that the elevator buttons in the new Apple campus are like iPhone buttons. They look like
the
icons.
So kind of a touch screen there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's pretty cool. Yeah. I mean, actually, that would be kind of neat.
Yeah.
Hey, I was going to bring up one other thing. Like I said, talking about that cruise ship that we were on, it had its first cruise earlier this year, or was it last year? No, I keep thinking it came out in 2017, but it's called Harmony of the Seas, world's largest cruise ship right now. It'll soon be supplanted by another ship. We had been on Oasis of the Seas, which is a kind of an older version, actually the first in this series of huge cruise ships. But the thing I found really interesting was that, first of all, instead of, it used to be on cruise ships, in fact, most of them still is, but if you want to book a shore excursion or get a dining reservation or find out where something is on the ship, you pretty much had to, stand in line somewhere and wait for, to talk to somebody, and then they would do it for you. Well, on this ship, they had a bunch of these kiosks, and they were iPads, the 9.7-inch iPads in the kiosk. They had a RFID card reader on there, and that's, really what you used all around the ship, or a RFID band. And you use that to sign into this thing, and then you could go through and just kind of tap your way through and make reservations. And it's charged to your room through that login RFID card. So I think, that was pretty cool. I really like that. And there were literally hundreds of these things around the ship. But the thing I found really fascinating is that for the first time that I've seen on a cruise ship, all of the customer service area computers were iMacs.
Mm.
There were 21-inch iMacs, and they had these things sitting there, and that's what they're using to call up information and look at bills, different things like that. If you had any questions and you went to the customer service desk, that's what they were working on was Macs. Now, one of this cruise line that we were on, Royal Caribbean, they have a sister cruise line, Celebrity, that they actually have Apple stores on a lot of their ships, and they use Macs in their computer lab. But it just totally amazed me to see how widespread Apple technology was pretty much all over the ship.
It is interesting. So, and then of course all the iPhones everywhere. But I think a lot of that, probably the reason ships and things do is pretty much the Mac and the iPad. There's not a lot of configuration. It's going to just mostly just work, and makes it so easy. And when one goes out, you know what to do, but basically don't ever hardly go out. Just keep going. So it is interesting.
And I was really happy as well. I mean, we were on a ship, 6,400 passengers. Once again, does not feel crowded at all because it's a huge ship. It's a city at sea. But the fastest satellite internet I've ever had, and I found out, did a little research, is from a company called, if I can remember it again, I think it's like, O3B or something like that is the name of the company, or OB3. But anyway, it's sold on Royal Caribbean cruises as VOOM, VOOM. But what this is a lot of the existing satellite internet services, they use satellites that are in geosynchronous orbit. In other words, they're stuck in space 1 point above, above a point on Earth. This is actually a rotating, as they call it, a middle Earth orbit, about 9,000 miles out. It's a rotating constellation of a bunch of these different satellites, and they're much closer to Earth than the geostationary satellites are. So you have less latency, and it was just fast. And I was reading this company is talking about some of the speeds that they're looking at being able to deliver when their second generation satellites come out in 2020, and it's just amazing. So I just hope they start selling this for home use so we can go, hey, Comcast.
Yeah. Of course, was your upload speed decent too?
Of course not, but but the download speeds were remarkably good. I was getting maybe, I wish I could remember the numbers on that, but it wasn't that great, up, but download speeds were surprisingly good. I mean, I was streaming YouTube videos, and they were coming down just fine. Other cruise lines won't let you do that.
Mm. That's pretty neat, though, the access. Speaking of that, and this is totally off subject of whatever we was talking about, of course, pretty much everywhere is either, trying to get a fiber and high-speed internet. I remember, probably about 25 or so years ago, about the time we first moved here on the farm in that neighborhood, about 23 years ago, there was talk of the local electric company sending internet over power lines. That was before fiber or anything. And it really sort of fell apart because of fiber. But I just read about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 now, that AT&T has started experimenting with that again. And they have a place in Georgia and one other where they're sending high-speed internet to people's houses over, power lines. And so it's really getting some high-speed internet, they hope, to very rural places where you'll probably never have good copper and certainly not fiber internet. So
yeah, because pretty much everybody in the country, with with the exception of some cabins out in the middle of Alaska, you know, everybody's pretty much got good power,
Right.
unless you're totally off the grid. And you know, I know there have been experiments over the years, as you well know, as a ham radio person. There's been a lot of concern from the ARRL, which is kind of the big hobbyist organization. They do a lot of lobbying with the Federal Communications Commission, but there's been a lot of concern about internet over power line because you tend to get, I guess you could say, almost a lot of bleed.
Mm-hmm.
It almost acts as a transmitter, and a lot of radio amateurs and professional radio folks were very concerned that it was going to cause a lot of interference out there. But if AT&T, you know, has figured out a way of doing it without causing, you know, widespread panic among the ham radio folks out there, which aren't that many anyway, that would be a good thing.
Well, it would be, and I don't know enough about this to even discuss it, but I've also read another hope for a lot of people, as they call it, fiberless fiber. Basically, it's just firing, you know, internet light without the actual fiber from one, you know, point to another, and getting pretty good distance and very high speed. Of course, things can easily get in the way, you know, too. And so, but they're working on a lot of other things. You saying all that about the satellite made me think of it.
I was going to bring up, it's kind of funny that you bring that up. The engineering building at the University of Colorado, you know, back when I was going in the 1970s, one of the things they prided themselves on was the fact that they had actually a laser data transmission system that was connected to what they called the Marine Street Computing Center. And they had a pretty high power laser, and, you know, had figured out a way of, you know, basically encoding the bits into this light stream and decoding it on the other end. And it was entirely experimental, but I think they actually used it in many cases. But it was funny because whenever it would snow really badly or rain, it just shut down.
Right. Yeah, they would. Well, that is interesting. Of course, you've been a ham radio operator too, know that a lot of are using it back in the 80s, before there was internet per se for the average person. We would send a lot of data through the air, you know, using packet AX.25 protocol, and even on HF, but that would get down to at best 300 baud, but it was usually slower than that. So
yeah, sometimes I think it was like 25 baud.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'll come back next week when this message is done. Oh, it's a tweet. Yeah. No.
Yeah. But those were fun days and laid the foundation for what we have now, you know, quite a bit.
Yeah, it really is interesting about that, you know, when you think about it, because a lot of the, I guess you could say a lot of the technology that we use every day, you know, some of the cellular technology, really a lot of the early experiments were done by people who were amateur radio folks in their spare time, but working for companies like AT&T and the Bell Labs back in the day. And, we really owe a debt of gratitude to those people who, you know, had this dream of, hey, maybe we can figure out a way that everybody can have a phone in their pocket or on their wrist.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting, you know, where that it's all, I guess, come from and where it's going. Actually, talking about ham radio operators, there's more numbers. The numbers are bigger now, I think, than they've ever been. I had read. And of course, I'm a lifetime member of ARRL, so I get their monthly magazine.
See, I forgot to renew last year, so.
Well, I'll get that till the day I die, because about 25 or 30 years ago, I paid up for life, which was pretty cheap then. I think it was $800. So I got the membership magazine the rest of my life. But even here, and this is not, I'm sure, high tech anywhere, but used to be out in the country, every time we pay our electric bill, I had to go outside, read the 5 digits on the meter, send it in. But then I got notice one day I no longer had to do that. They've got some kind of system that sends it back to them, so.
Yeah, it's funny. We used to have in Denver, Public Service Company of Colorado. We always called it the entry level position in that company was a meter reader, and you would go out, once a month. You'd take your meter book and you'd walk around and you'd go to this particular house, and it had a particular number associated with it. You'd look at the gas meter and the electric meter, and you'd put down the readings, and you'd bring that book back, and somebody would put that into a computer, or I don't know what they did before that, but it was just ridiculous, the amount of manual effort that was put into it. Then at one point, they kind of updated that. And what I mean by update was they finally figured out that they could have a truck just drive through the neighborhood at regular speeds, and you put a little radio transmitter on everything and it pretty much picks it up. And I don't know if they've done it yet, but I keep hearing rumors now that they're just cellular modems are so cheap and so small that they're starting to build in cellular modems. So these things will just call once a day, once a month, whatever they need to, and just, here's what this person used. Crazy.
And maybe what they're doing here, I don't know, but some way they get the data back to the company. And so, and it's nice. You never have to worry about, because you would forget to read it on the right day, and it would skew your bill a little bit. And, everything. So
yeah, because then they'd say, oh my God, you had a 31-day billing month this month and a 42 the next month, because you were on vacation and didn't read your meter on time. Yep. Hey, speaking of cellular, I had to laugh. My dad, of course, has got a pacemaker that he had installed. And I think I mentioned that he's got this box that kind of reads. It takes readings from that. If it sees anything weird happening with his heart, it notifies the cardiologist. And likewise, if they see anything odd going on with the pacemaker, it actually runs its own diagnostics and sends that stuff out. Well, I noticed it, of course, had a plug on the back, RJ11, I think it is, for phone line. And, but, when I started looking through the manual, they said, whatever you do, don't hook this to a phone line. Use this instead. And there was this little USB dongle about that long, and it's a cellular modem. And they just said, just plug it in, and it will call us automatically. We've pre-programmed it, and it'll talk to our system. And they actually, said, 99.9% of the places in major metropolitan areas, and even, out in the sticks, the cellular connections are more apt to get through than dial-up. So I was totally impressed.
And is it now, if his heart starts beating slower, does that mean that they've pushed out an update that you didn't know about?
Well, I was just thinking maybe it's like, if you do a DJI drone update, it sits there, and at one point the lights are all flashing yellow, alternating, and so maybe his eyes will be.
What's that light coming out of your chest? I just had an update.
Yeah, Dad, are you updated? Yeah, don't reboot.
Yeah, really. So,
oof.
Yeah,
that could be scary.
Oh yeah, it definitely could. So what's big? We've talked about things we want to come up. What's happening in Apple news? We mentioned $30 battery replacement. I've actually been a little out of pocket for the last couple of days and the holidays and everything. So what's happening?
Well, I'm just a cat just put her claws into my leg. Ow! I am not a scratching post, cat. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is before iFixit had a chance to do it, my buddies at OWC actually did the first teardown of an iMac Pro.
I watched that video. Do you know some of those guys?
Well, actually, I don't know any of the hardware guys, so I'm going to have to look a little bit closer in the video, though, because I was just kind of glancing at it while I was doing something else today. But they beat iFixit.
Well, I watched that from OWC and I thought, how will he ever get that back together?
Lots
But I
of
guess they
glue.
do. Yeah.
Glue and Penelope screws.
Well, I think when he was taking it apart, my thoughts about the iMac Pro may have dropped a little bit because he said, now holding the screen on is tape.
Yeah.
And he just ran a little tool around to score it and popped the screen right off. And for some reason, it just didn't seem like a $5,000 computer
Yeah.
after he did that.
Yeah, it's surprising how many adhesives they use in a lot of these computers. Like you take a look at the traditional iMac. If I remember correctly, it's got a similar type adhesive. You kind of heat it up using like a hair dryer or something like that, and then you use a couple suction cups, and
yeah, I know it.
It pops off, and amazing stuff. I always get impressed by iFixit too. One of these days, I wonder if they're gonna start tearing something apart. Like, oh no.
Yeah. Well, you remember was it last year, probably a year before now, iFixit got into trouble with Apple because they revealed something before it was public that
Yes.
they had been sent and they said they wouldn't be receiving them early anymore. I just remember something about that.
Yeah, that could be why OWC ended up making it there. But interesting thing was, of course, they make a lot of money, a lot of their money, I should say, selling memory upgrades and hard drive upgrades and things like that. And they're, at this time, since they were able to go in and rip one of them apart, they're apparently evaluating what they call turnkey upgrades. You'll be able to send a Mac Pro to them and say, I want this much RAM and I want, this particular, maybe even a processor down the road. You might be able to actually even do a processor upgrade. They're still looking into that. But
well, I saw them say that they'll probably have it where you can send your iMac Pro in and have it upgraded. I think what I was surprised, not necessarily surprised, but just didn't expect, the 1 terabyte SSD was 2 little 512 sticks. They weren't much bigger than it looked like a USB thumb drive,
Yeah.
And it had 2 512s of that. So I think Apple uses a lot of maybe proprietary stuff, makes it a little hard to upgrade.
Yeah, it's just surprising how much, how small some of this gets, especially when you start taking a look at, like the SSDs that they use in MacBooks anymore. They're just tiny.
Well, they really are. And it goes back to, I think we could have that Apple TV size Mac Mini for $200.
Yeah. I'd love it.
Oh, I would too.
Yeah. What a great hobbyist computer. I keep saying that, but what a great hobbyist computer.
Yeah.
You say, oh, I'd love to have a computer that I could just, use some automation program, and hopefully they use workflow to be able to do this. But, you'd be able to write a little program and turn it into a intelligent webcam, something like that.
Right.
So I don't know. I'm just coming up with wacky ideas, but it's the type of thing that you see people going out and getting a Raspberry Pi and playing around with. And, maybe it's not as expandable as a Raspberry Pi. You don't have direct access to being able to poke wires onto pins. But, I think for a lot of people, if they could do that and then let a third party come up with a breakout box that you could just hook sensors and stuff up to. Great hobbyist machine.
Yeah. I don't know which way Apple's going. I'd like to see them go both ways. But you and I both have expressed we're not too interested in their music endeavors. I really am not interested in their video endeavors. I don't think they're just going to push toward hobbyist, but I would like to see a lot more of that. And I guess maybe we're almost at an hour, so that would be something I would love to see. More things that really do benefit those who like to tinker. And I think the Mac Pro will probably fulfill that for me, something I can upgrade for a long time.
I was going to mention too, well, maybe mention it because it just went in, that thought just almost gelled and then it just went away.
I've done that.
Being up way too early in the morning will definitely do it to you. But it had something to do with, I can't remember.
This could really be a new segment in our show. Guess what Steve forgot?
Yeah. What is Steve thinking? If you can guess what Steve was thinking about and remind him, then you win.
Well, I did it a while ago. You were telling something about what amateur radio operators are going to do, and I had a great thought to tell you, and it was gone. I haven't thought
See,
of
it
it
happens
since.
to you too.
Yeah. Well, it was about 4:10 a.m. this morning, so that's
same here for me,
yeah.
except Denver time. But
yeah, that was
you
a lot
were already up by then.
Yeah. So,
oof. Well, I tell you, folks, if I don't know, this is crazy. Anyway, we're in a new year. I'm sure there's going to be some new things coming out. One thing I may have talked about on the last episode is we're probably going to see some changes to the what we call Team AWT. Basically, Dennis and I spend most of our time just keeping the site running. So a lot of the extra features that we thought we were going to have haven't been able to get out at all. So what we're kind of looking at is, just some different ideas right now. And we'll try to announce those hopefully sometime in January and just make life a little bit better for the folks who support us with their dollars. And we love them very much. We do. Yeah. And like I always say, maybe one of these days we can actually afford to pay this guy.
I don't do enough. I just broadcast. And so just
hey, wait a second. Broadcasters make a lot more money than writers, don't they?
Yeah. In some venues, perhaps. And
not here.
But hopefully next week we'll have a few things to report. I'm hoping for a new iOS update pretty soon. I noticed my phone is not rebooted in 19 days, maybe 20. So it must have been the last, I think it was just 3 weeks ago tomorrow. It was on a Wednesday, our last iOS update. So it's getting about time. Apple does have a good history with updates. You can count on something about every month.
Well, and at least they get out to just about every device out there too.
Well, they pretty much do. So
20%. And
all right.
We won't talk about Android. Let's not talk about Android. Anyway, for Apple World Today, once again, I'm Steve Sande, and he is
Marty Edwards.
There we go.
I didn't
forget his name. I just wanted him to say his name. But we will be back next week at the same bat time, same bat channel. If you like the show, please give us one of those little thumbs up on YouTube. And also subscribe to the video, because that way when we go live, you actually get a notification saying, hey, those two idiots are out there talking again. And you can jump on your computer, pull out your iPhone, and watch us forget things.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, once again, to end things up, because everybody loves it so much, we'll end the show with our famous outro. Good night, everybody.